Esse vídeo é sobre algo que fazemos todos os dias: gerar lixo. O Brasil gera em torno de 80 milhões de toneladas de resíduos sólidos urbanos por ano, o equivalente a 30 estádios do tamanho do Maracanã. Quase nada disso é reciclado, pois 96% de tudo isso vai para aterros sanitários ou lixo de céu aberto. Apesar dos significativos esforços através da reciclagem de catadores, compostagem e aproveitamento de gás de aterro, a valorização energética vem para complementar essas tecnologias, visando a quase total mitigação dos gases do efeito estufa, como é feito em países desenvolvidos. O conhecimento e educação sobre o processo do seu lixo pode trazer benefícios ambientais, sociais e até mesmo econômicos. Usinas Waste to Energy são baseadas na recuperação energética, através do tratamento térmico do lixo. A Aeration, a Associação Brasileira de Recuperação Energética de Resíduos, busca resolver dois grandes problemas atuais: a destinação dos resíduos sólidos e a geração de energia limpa. Seu lixo pode virar eletricidade, energia para a produção de cimento, combustíveis, empregos, evitar a contaminação da água potável, reduzir as emissões de gás de efeito estufa até 8 vezes, além do aumento dos níveis de reciclagem, já que os países que mais tratam termicamente seus resíduos são os que detêm os melhores índices de reciclagem e compostagem. A Aeration quer revolucionar o setor de resíduos no Brasil, e você está convidado a fazer parte dessa história conosco.
And you are invited to be part of this.
Qual é a base de uma grande...
What's the basis of a great partnership? How do you know you can trust and count on a partner to be there when you need him, regardless of where you are? When it comes to your business, would it help knowing the brand that has 100 years of experience manufacturing quality equipment for teams like yours to depend on? Would it matter if you knew this company is founded on the idea of innovation and technology can sustain communities? What if each time you worked, you could learn how to make your company go forward? And know that regardless of the challenges you need, your partner will be there to help you. For a century, Komatsu has been this partner. Our roots date back to a lush forest in Japan that once housed a copper mine that was vital to the neighboring community. From this forest and the imagination of our founder emerged a global company with an uncompromising commitment to quality, reliability, innovation, and the partnership you need to empower you to drive our society forward. Today, we know that solving your commercial challenges should solve social ones. Capacity must be combined with smart data, creativity with proven results, and financial success with social good. By means of collaboration, we can create the world we need for the next generations. That's why you trust Komatsu, your partner to create a sustainable future where business, people, and our planet prosper. Very good morning, everyone. Welcome to this first forum of sanitation and energy from waste. I'll be with you as your host today, and I want to start by thanking you all for being here and give you a few messages before we start. This forum is a realization of Mason Motion with the support of its this advising committee composed by IFAT, brand, and what the Brazilian Association of Concessionaires of Water and Sanitation Services. I also want to thank all our sponsors, Binden Group in Piralizzi and Komatsu, our silver sponsor. I also want to thank our supporters, Citizen, the Union of Sanitation Companies, Lide Deutschland, and VDI Brazil. And I also want to thank Ambiental Mercantil, our media partner. Before anything, follow us on social media. There is a dedicated page for the forum on LinkedIn. So join and look for us and you'll find news about the event. In addition to that, during the day, you have the opportunity of asking questions to all the speakers. And in our platform, you have a question tag right next to the chat. Please use it to ask your questions so we can present them to the sponsors. In case we don't have time to answer all the questions during the panels, we'll write them down, share them with the speakers to whom they are directed, and then we'll get back to you. Also, enjoy this is an event, a virtual event, but we also have a possibility of networking. You have chat from several companies and marketers from public and private companies, consultants, different cities, and a lot of participants who can interact and exchange knowledge with you. In addition to that, in case you want to listen to this event in English, we also have simultaneous translation. Right below the space reserved for the video on the platform, you have an icon of phone headset. Check on that and you can choose the language, and you can also change the language of the platform clicking on the top right hand corner, changing from the Brazilian flag to the United Kingdom flag. Production, I want to ask you to please show the video recorded by Rolf Pickert, who left us a message for the opening. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rolf Pickert, a General Director of Sewage in Brazil, who's organizer of this sanitation forum powered by IFAT. I want to welcome all of you who are going to be with us during the whole day, and send a special greetings to Yuri Schmidtke, President of ABRAN, Brazilian Association of Residue Energy from Waste, Percy Soares Neto, Executive Director of ABICON, Brazilian Association of Private Concessionaires of Public Services of Water and Sanitation, Stefan Agni, First Counselor and Head of Cooperation of the European Union in Brazil, who will participate in our opening. Before we start the programmed issues for the event, I want to make a series of say thanks to a lot of people and institutions who made it possible for us to be here. I want to thank first ABRAN, Yuri, Rubens, and your team. You've been our first partners in this forum, and since the beginning of the event, your valued contributions and your effort have allowed us to bring an agenda that is relevant and of high level for today. In sequence, I also want to thank ABICON, Percy and his team for being with us in this initiative, and as advisors collaborating for aligning the debates to the reality of our market. I also want to thank our sponsors and companies who trust our proposal and have supported us in this first edition. Binder Group, Teralize, our gold sponsors, and Komatsu, our silver partner. Thank you very much. I have to thank Ambiental Mercantil, our media partner, as well as Lider Deutschland, the Ministry of Regional Development, Cidadã Abimac, and VDI Brazil, our institutional supporters. Your communication efforts and collaboration for the development of the event have been essential for its success. Thank you to all of you. Since the legal milestone for basic sanitation was signed in 2020, many debates have arisen about the consequences and challenges resulting from it. Large projects like SEDAI in Rio de Janeiro, Casal in Alagoas, Caesa in Amapá, among others, have received great attention from the media and from investors, and give an impression that only large arrangements are valid or interesting. However, we know that most of the 5,000 Brazilian cities have up to 20,000 inhabitants and also need to receive 99% supply of drinking water and 90% collection, sewage collection. We need to talk about them. And it's important to highlight that we also go through a critical energy moment in our country. Debates with the diversifying energy generation and the installed capacity in the country compared to the need you have for the next days, rate clear questions, and we know that the problem is way bigger than we thought. And thinking about this scenario, we have decided to get together and provide an event that provides connection between the sector for the debate of regionalization, spreading of success cases, best practices, opportunities for the sectors involved to get good, positive results, bringing them to cities of all sizes. We'll also talk about the opportunities of waste to energy sector and what can be explored, since possibilities, different possibilities and beneficial and essential opportunities have been raised. With a potential market for 700 billion reais in investment in sanitation, with and the waste to energy opportunity, this forum takes an important step in changing directions towards our objective. We want to contribute to a change in our Brazilian culture regarding sanitation. I'll close here, and I hope you can enjoy the entire contents of the event and take the opportunity to connect to other participants. Digital events have also been created for networking.
I would like to invite you to join us here to give us all your welcome messages. You have the floor now. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, everyone. I would like to thank the IFAT Advisory Board and everyone who will take part in the next panel. Renato, Alfredo, Fabio, I'd like to welcome you all. It's a huge pleasure to be able to support the organization of this event, which is the initial step to bring the largest fair in the world. I'd like to tell you that energy recovery today is an essential aspect for the best practices in sanitation. We have to focus on that and in the circular economy, because we need to generate energy using residues. And we should focus on the environmental problems caused by landfills. In Brazil today, we have huge problems, and we can have renewable energy. Waste is energy today, so being able to generate energy using residues, that's great. And sewage can also become energy, which is great for the society. We realize that Brazil is wasting a huge potential in energy without energetic recovery and valuation. That's why I'd like to welcome you all who are taking part in our event. We are here to discuss the best practices in the integrated management of residues and waste to protect public health in the urban sector. And we'll talk about sanitation. Brazil spends approximately more than 50 billion per year in healthcare treatment because of residues and people who are in touch with the ill-managed waste. This cost could be dramatically reduced. The World Economic Forum points out that countries that focus on waste to energy have less problems with public health. All this waste is recycled and destined to energetic recovery to prevent the complete destruction of these residues. And this is very important to protect public health and the environment. With that, I'd like to welcome you all. Thank you. Thank you so much for your words, for your opening. Certainly, we will have a great day today. This is the first step to discuss such an extremely important issue to the future of our country. And Tessia, I would like to give you the floor also. Please come here in front of the cameras. You have the floor. As a member of our advisory board, we'd like to hear your opening message. Please, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Rafael, for your presentation. I would like to congratulate you on this initiative. You really deserve to be congratulated. This is a very challenging and important matter. And we have been challenged to find solutions related to energy generation. This is our main agenda, and it involves the infrastructure sector. We understand that, especially in the case of sewage, energy recovery is extremely important, and it should be on the radar of companies. We have been working to increase awareness related to that. We have sewages that are thrown on landfills. This is quite a waste, and it really affects the landfill. This is a superficial analysis, but if we consider the blocks 1, 2, 3, and 4 of SEDAI's auction, for example, we are talking here about 25,000 tons per month in sewage, and this is an absurdity. It compromises the life of landfills, and we should give it another destination. That is why we are looking more and more and paying more attention to this issue. And Stefano, I believe that cooperation with Europe may really be helpful to us and may give us new ideas of how we can do it within the best environmental practices, how we can do it in the best way, respecting all the environmental practices. So I believe it's a path of no return. This is the first event we organize. IFAT has brought a few solutions along this line. This is the first event. We should start our discussions. I believe we will have a great day of work today. You can count on us to hold this discussion. We need to talk more, and we need to discover more things we should do. And we should look at the sewage treatment stations as centers that can be used to produce raw material. This is urgent. Energy recovery and reuse water, sludge mining. There are many, many ways we can look at a wastewater treatment plant, and we can consider it a raw material production central that helps to feed production processes with power, fertilizers. We should consider every item. So our discussions today can only contribute to give us good ideas, to clarify many things. So Rafael, you can count with our assistance. Stefano, thank you so much for being here. I wish you all a good work and an excellent day. Thank you very much. We have here once more a kickoff, and we are going to talk about energy recovery. That's very important. And we are being able to talk about this also due to the sanitation framework. We will talk about it in the first table of this morning. So thank you very much for your support. Stefano, I would also like to give you the floor. Could you please come here? You are the representative from the European Union, and we do know the European Union has important agreements of technical cooperation and exchange of knowledge with Brazil. So could you please tell us a bit about this scenario and about all things that have been done and the collaboration between Brazil and the European Union? You're welcome. You have the floor. Thank you. It's a great pleasure for me to be here in this meeting of Sanitation and Energetic Recovery. Good morning, Yuri. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We focus on the private sector and public sector, and we are going to discuss this. We are going to talk about significant issues, and the climate issues are imposing new challenges on us. And we need to have an integrated management of water resources. This is becoming increasingly important. I would like to mention three important points. First of all, the political importance of water resources in Europe. Second, I'd like to give you an example of cooperation that we have in here. And to close, I would like to introduce briefly to you the political agreements that exist between Brazil and the European Union on water resources. Let us begin. The European Union recognizes the importance of water in sanitation. There are many strategies in the Green Pact from Europe related to the importance of water. Water has an essential role in agriculture. It adds value. It's extremely important, and it causes a positive impact on the environment. In the recovery of water resources, foodstuff depends on water and on its supply. We recognize the importance of protected areas in order to maintain and restore essential environmental services. Lastly, we have a strategy related to the circular economy. In this context, water resources and energy recovery are extremely important. Besides that, Europe has signed many multilateral agreements related to the sustainable management of water resources and access to sanitation, beginning with the Paris Agreement on climate change. Within this context, I can say that most countries prioritize specific contributions that are nationally determined related to water, confirming that water and sanitation are essential for climate resilience. Water and sanitation have an essential role in the mitigation of climate change and the recovery of residual water and water management to increase the collection of CO2 in moist zones. And the urban agenda also recognizes that the sustainable and efficient and inclusive services are essential to the cities and current communities and future communities. I'd like to introduce you to a concrete project we have related to water. In order to face the many challenges related to the access of the population to water, the state of Ceará created in the 90s a model, the integrated system of sanitation. More than 30 years later, the government decided to increase and replicate this successful model, and this resulted in a specific program, which is composed by funds from the government of the state of Ceará, and a loan of 50 million euros was given from the Development Chamber of Germany and 7 million euros from the European Union in order to give better access to potable water and to sanitation services to improve the access of the state population, protecting water resources from contamination, from effluents. These measures include the construction and improvement of the potable water systems and sanitation systems, as well as making the population aware of the importance of using water properly. Currently, we have 18 sanitation systems that are integrated in the state of Ceará, and approximately 700,000 people have access to that. With the implementation of this program, other centers of 20,000 inhabitants will have access to a better water supply.
This is the concrete example of establishing water supply and sanitation structure. And we also have other issues regarding this debate. And now we'll receive the legal responsibility of following the norms, the regulating norms, and these reference norms should guide the regulation of the sector relating to its four components. 1, water supply. 2, collection and treatment of sewage. Collection and final disposal of solid residues and management of residual waters. Other experiences in Europe, like Portugal and Germany, that might be interesting in the exercise of the new attributions in sanitation for this agency will be shared. And then you can find opportunities and events can be found to exchange experience. The political dialogue aims to establish strategy for regulation of sanitation in Brazil. The expected results would be identifying the necessary norms for the sector. Second, recommend guidelines for the regulations to be elaborated. The National Agency of Water should define the priorities in its agenda. The European Union can help in the implementation with of these services, and in this context, dialogue with the private sector is important. If you have ideas and suggestions on how to improve the legal framework, we would be interested in hearing you. Themes like these can be debated in a context of a dialogue between governments and, of course, between us and other partners in the private sector. There's always also a possibility of strengthening the institutional framework and improving the implementation of the Brazilian legislation. It's a great pleasure for me being here in such an interesting event. And the delegation from the European Union are at your services. Thank you. Stefan, thank you very much for your words and for participating with us in this session. And for your work together with the Brazilian government, that we can strengthen our connections and take advantage of all the knowledge you have already built in Europe. Okay, now I would like to start our first session, our first debate panel. I want to invite our colleagues who are going to be part of this debate that will talk about modeling of projects for regional blocks and smaller cities, talking about financing, conception, and presentation to the market. And to be part of this panel, I want to first invite Alfredo de Assis Carvalho. He's the director of the Project Financing Department of the National Sanitation Secretariat of the Ministry of Regional Development. Thank you, Alfredo, for being here. Flávio Tagliasachi Gavazza, Superintendent of Government Services at Caixa, and Manuel Renato, Program Director of the Special Secretariat of the PPI of the Ministry of Economy. Thank you all for being here. Gentlemen, as we mentioned, this debate aims to bring knowledge and regarding the structuring and modeling of this project, mobilizing them for auctions. So this would be a step prior to the auctions and implementation of the projects. I want to divide this debate in three parts. We're talking about regionalization and these arrangements that will be configured. We're going to have to go through credit so the operation itself can be structured. The concession proposal can be structured, and also talk about implementation so we can close the cycle. To start, Alfredo, I want to put you on the spot so you can talk a little bit about the regionalization and the structure. If you can start, please. You will have the floor. Welcome and thank you. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, everyone. First of all, I want to thank, on behalf of Pedro, the Secretary, Pedro Maranhão, for the opportunity of participating here and sharing our experience, the experience we have in the National Secretariat for Sanitation. And I want to talk a little bit about such an important theme. In the context of structuring projects, it works as a preliminary work. The regionalization of the services is a guideline of the new sanitation framework that has been signed. There was a model for regionalization since the 70s, but now the new law established a new framework for regionalization. What's the goal of this regionalization process? In essence, is achieving universalization of services. Considering the instruments inserted in the new framework, they are always seek this goal of ensuring universal access to services and providing technical and financial feasibility to the projects. A more specific and immediate part of this process is generating gains of scale, especially. In addition to that, we also have a process that promotes better regulation and planning of these services, so that you can also achieve gain of scale in these activities, not only in providing the services, but also in this planning activities, regulation, which are very important. There's also a guideline in the framework looking for uniformization of the processes. There are numerous regulating agencies, and sometimes it presents difficulties for the service providers in terms of reaching a compatibility between different sets of rules. So one of the goals of the framework is to facilitate this project. But the process of defining regional goals is also focused on that. An important point that it's important for us to mention regarding regionalization, that often when we talk to subnational agents in smaller cities and sometimes in states, it's important to highlight the importance of the role and the attitude of the states in this process. The law makes it very clear that we need an action process from the states, and we expect a process of cooperation among states. We don't expect, the new framework doesn't expect the states to present their proposals for regionalization without talking to the cities. But it's clear that the states have a role to fill. They need to be motivated to do that. So the basic regionalization proposals involve state and local rules and complementary rules, and they need to be defined according to settlements and metropolitan regions. That's one way of achieving regionalization. Then we have the regional sanitation agencies, and our perspective in here as a last resource is that the law provides the federal government with tools to fulfill this role. But our expectations is to work with the states, even those who have not yet been able to establish proposals, and work with them so we can achieve all this, so we can build these proposals together. The criteria we expect everyone to follow are several, and several aspects that could guide regionalizations. For example, you have cities that share physical structures. You have criteria of putting together blocks with a minimum number of inhabitants. You can also use traditional social divisions of the states. The main thing is that we have defined that it's important that the entire state are contemplated, especially with regards to providing water sanitation services, so that smaller cities are not left behind. This is extremely important. In the case of the management of solid residues, for example, the law is less specific and less assertive regarding these components, but so there's some room for us to acknowledge the consortiums that already exist and that are already common, especially in this sector. Our regulating decree has opened some space for these consortiums to be acknowledged. So basically, this is the situation we have. We have some states that still have not presented their proposals. We are articulating with them to try to see how we can solve this issue. We have consulting services that we hired to help us with this technical advising. The decree has defined that some projects that were already ongoing, they would not necessarily have to go through this regionalization process, considering, for example, that the blocks that have already in an advanced process of concession, they will not be subject to the legal restrictions regarding the allocation of public funds. But we understand that it's important that the state calculates and includes this municipalities that were not contemplated in this process. States, for example, such as Rio de Janeiro and Mato Grosso do Sul, we intend to talk to them so all cities are contemplated in some way. In case of Amapá, where the entire, all municipalities of the states have been contemplated, this is a case where we wouldn't have any problem. The distribution of blocks in the state would be more a formalization of what is already happening, because no municipality was left behind. But you still have 4 states that still don't have anything: Acre, Pará, Tocantins, and Santa Catarina, where they have a kind of a different process, where they have a decree that needs to be adjusted through complementary measures. So the process of regionalization is essential. It's a requirement for us to structure and start the processes of concession in a way that is compliant with the guidelines of the law. And we are here trying to do our job to help the municipalities. We are open to any state or municipality that needs to clear any doubts. We are always in contact both with representatives of the regions and those who are structuring the policies, the banks and everything. We are here at your service to clear doubts and help in this process.
Thank you. I would like now to invite Renato to tell us about this subject and talk about how these processes have been evolving. Depending on the arrangements, you can establish a concession process, but you can also establish different rules, interstate rules, and the population will be smaller, even though this is a very important subject. Renato, you have the floor. Tell us about how you have been working with our friends of the MDR with regard to those issues. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with all the representatives, such as select audience and important colleagues in the coordination of this conversation. I'd like to congratulate the organizers of our event for allowing us to talk about such a relevant matter, which is not discussed enough here in Brazil. So I'd like to thank all the organizers for supporting this very important initiative. Now we can talk about the new law, the new framework, which tries to improve the efficiency in the whole sanitation process in all its modalities, water treatment plants and wastewater treatment plants. Of course, the challenges are different, but they are all extremely important. Now, Alfredo gave us a broad context. Regionalization, as it is in Brazil, is not something new, but with the law 1423, it really received a boost. Now we try to help MDR to implement, to make concrete the intentions of this new law that was approved. So the major challenge is helping states with this regionalization at first, and also to make concrete this process of service concession, which is being made by the states. I'd like to share a few important things with you, gentlemen, for this process. Well, economic sustainability is a very important matter, so we can make these services universal, but we cannot forget the trade-off between governance and the size of the block. In theory, the larger the block, the more economic sustainability you have, but there are many governance complexities that were added here. Many times you do not have enough synergy. People do not have the same goals, the same targets. So this can make governance very complex. Adding all municipalities without synergy, without identity in one block, perhaps is not the best model. Many Brazilian states were not concerned with these issues, like the economic issue, because they did not conduct studies on the economic feasibility. And many did not look at the governance issues. In practice, we need to look at these regionalizations from our viewpoint, as here from the PPI as partners of the Caixa Econômica Federal and BNDES. We try to do a coordination work, and we try to work together with the NDR. And our first concern is looking at regionalization and looking at the possible counterpart. Many times we need to fraction these regionalizations, especially the macro regionalizations done by the states, opening space in order to have a conversation with the states and especially with municipalities, because this is very important within this context. We need to value regionalization initiatives that already exist. Otherwise, it's useless. Many times, this regionalization happened after municipalities gathered around public consortiums. So first of all, we should value the regionalization. This is very important. And second, we need to look at this trade-off and the size of the blocks, because many times it is not enough if we look at the size of the block and the economic feasibility. Sometimes there is not enough synergy. The second reminder is related to a concern we have. Our work is focused on generating trust around these projects. And what is essential is the quality of the project and the elements used to structure the projects. Economic sustainability is essential, but we can never forget that we need to have a social legitimacy. So we have a major concern with the prices and tariffs. We need to make these services universalized, but we need to have feasible fees. So we have a dialogue with BNDES and Caixa in order to internalize the sustainability of our project and the social sustainability of the project, which is reflected on the tariffs. And this is related to the National Water Agency. I always like to give you data from PNAD from 2019, so we can never forget where these issues are concentrated. 92% of the Brazilian water deficit is concentrated in houses where the population earns up to 2 minimum wages. So the capacity of paying of our population is very low. Even though sanitation has many positive factors, we should be especially concerned with the fees. And I don't believe that sanitation being used as a tax policy tool is not good. If you charge absurd amounts, that's not the best model. First, because the tariffs will increase, and second, because we are not contributing. Many times these resources will not go back to the sanitation sector. They will be used in other priorities of the municipal governments or state governments. So we should be concerned mainly with the universalization of the services, and we should about deconstructing models that do not use sanitation as a tax policy tool. It has been used as an instrumental policy. It's essential to the environment, to urban development, to health, and to regional development. But we should be very careful. We cannot make it a tax policy tool. We are talking about it as the Ministry of Economy. We are worried about these issues, but we also have a strong social concern. I would not like to forget the first cycle of concessions in the 20th century, at the turn of the century actually, brought us many problems related to the social sustainability of this project. We should always be careful with this element, because this is what will make these services feasible. I would like to encourage you to hold this very important discussion. This is extremely important. Thank you. Yes, certainly, Renato. Our idea here is precisely discussing these issues. That's why we are beginning our discussions talking about painful issues. You mentioned very important points, especially when you talk about governance challenges and the grouping in different municipalities. At first, you look at the economic feasibility, but you forget to take into account other factors, cold numbers, let's say. And that's where governance becomes really complex. Another important subject you mentioned, and I'd like to discuss it with Alfredo again, is the regionalization inside a regional block in order to make feasible other types of services. I believe this is a very important issue. We should talk about it again. And I would like to mention, Flavio, the following. You should take part in our discussion. We were talking about how to structure these blocks and regionalization. I'd like to ask you for the scenario. I would like to know how Caixa Econômica has been supporting the work of the municipalities and states during this structuring work. Can you tell us about the work done by Caixa with the municipalities and states in order to make this feasible? We know that the major challenges are budget related nowadays. Not only that, but when we talk about such a specific subject such as sanitation, we should have enough skilled workers in order to structure and to bring the best possible model to the market. How has Caixa been supporting these initiatives? Good morning, Rafael. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Alfredo, Renato. Well, it is not easy to talk after Renato, but I will try. First of all, I'd like to say it's a huge pleasure to be here on behalf of Caixa Econômica. I'd like to congratulate the organizers of this event. Caixa understands the difficulties faced by the municipalities, especially the smallest ones. Structuring of PPPs and management of these PPPs is a very complex issue. We have been developing products and services to help municipalities and blocks. We work in partnership with the IDR, financial agents, and we work in partnership with the PPI, Renato, his whole team. And Caixa is present and takes part directly in this whole work. Considering our capillarity, we have 72 units, we have engineers, social technicians, operational personnel, countrywide. We have expertise, we have know-how related to these public policies and the problems of the states. We are currently working with PPPs. We have approximately 40 projects, and of these 40, 5 are sanitation projects. So projects that have already passed the public consultation, they have proven to be feasible. We are now moving to the final part, so we can really launch these projects. So yes, it is possible, and we can do this with our other parties. We have a product which we call Caixa Public Policies. It's a product launched by Caixa where we give advisory in engineering and the operational contract management area. It's all related to public policies. We have more than 600 agreements with several public agencies, and we can provide services to private and public agencies and specific technical support also, and resources collection, and we can give support so the other parties can act in compliance with the program rules. We need to provide all these services to the municipalities. And Caixa always provides training to the municipalities. We work in partnership with the federal government sometimes, and we have already had 2 editions of this training. This is a way of helping the technicians. Smaller municipalities have difficulties retaining talents and sharing knowledge, especially in concessions or PPPs. We have the bidding law, which we should focus on, and we have a difficulty and a dilemma. It's not easy to see PPPs as an opportunity for investment in the municipalities, and this should not be considered as a simple privatization. It's a concession which will return to the municipality in the future, and it will greatly benefit the population, increasing the capacity of investment of the agency. So this whole social communication work and pricing is also essential in order to legitimate the operation with social and sustainable tariffs. This is one of the hardest parts of our work. Political convincing, we need to have assemblies. This whole work and support is also given by Caixa.
Another work done by Caixa as a bank is managing the investing accounts for people. This is an important instrument to bring security in the management of tariff fees and everything. The service, in a way, brings information from the concession contract. Caixa manages the funds and then distributes to the proper places. So this management is done with the contract. We also provide banking, collection services and financing, both for private and public partners, which we do using Caixa funds in a process that is already well known by the municipalities. It's different from using the FGTS. And the ministry, as manager of the fund, provides longer term. So the timelines, the terms are different, but they have more freedom in terms of applying the funds. And they can use these lines of credit, for example, for partnerships between public and private sectors and other ways they deem proper. And finally, Caixa has worked with the government in the application of funds coming from the federal government into projects. Renato can bring more information, but we are working with the projects of resocialization, passing funds to private sector, and we have able to include the possibility of using these funds in parts that are essential for public-private partnerships. And we are together with the government working on this pilot so we can, in the future, use funds that come from the federal government to support the population and managing the payments of the counterparts. So this is something that might bring success in the short time. This is basically what I wanted to bring to you, but I'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you, Flávio. Manuel, since Flávio said Renato can bring more details, I want to involve you in this debate on how you're helping work on getting the credit and the funds for these projects. BBE is a transversal agency. We help public policies be applied. So we help MDR in the sanitation policy. We've been helping the structuring of projects through VEP. They come out of the budget of the Ministry of Economy in a fund that is managed by Caixa, aimed specifically at projects created in partnership. So we have projects regarding water, sewage, management of solid waste. We are supporting public consortiums, which is a way that we understand the Brazilian law can provide a multiplication of these funds that the public-private partnerships can provide to the smaller municipalities. We can't imagine that we are going to structure projects only for large cities. Our focus are on the medium and smaller countries, and for that we need governance. And this governance, according to our law, can be brought through public consortiums, according to the law, but we need this to make this concrete, and that means making the consortiums formal instances that are effectively functional, finding elements to bring stability to the operation. And we also have the side of the sectors that participate. We have also worked in many other areas when socio-educative areas that are related to the Ministry of Family and Women. They have a very high internal cost, and that is complicated for making feasible a service that is very expensive. So we're trying to find partnerships to bring down the cost and provide these projects. This is a challenge we face in all areas of public services. We're trying to start creating a pilot for child education. We have some projects in housing, and we also work with BNDES in all these areas, focusing on the regional blocks of water and sanitation with BNDES. Caixa has talent for working with smaller, medium, and small cities, thanks to the capillarity and the way they communicate with the smaller municipalities. And BNDES is more focused and has a vocation for talking to projects that are larger. So we try to talk with these two different organizations and make the link to distribute the competences and abilities so we can distribute the resources. We have different amounts of funds in the different organizations, and we're organizing the third factory of projects that will be related to the MDR, and which comes of the former fund focus on that. And this will also be a third source of structuring of projects that we hope will be very expressive. So with the three fronts working, they won't be able to handle everything we need, but that's a good start. This is something the country really needs, especially through the lack of funds invested in infrastructure at the three levels of government, and it's trying to recover this capability of planning, helping states, cities, and the federal government manage more competently the implementation of the public policies that are essential when we talk about universal supply, universal services. This is the message. From point of view of financing, we support Caixa and BNDES. They have a more active role. They are responsible for managing the funds. Caixa and BNDES as financial agents, because they operate different parts of the service that are complementary. So we have a solid structure, and our role here is to manage the projects so these funds are very well applied. Sometimes we lack good projects. That's not rare, and it's not an exception. Because we like quality projects. So this is the role of PPI. Great, fantastic. An important point you mentioned is the third factory of projects that is being developed, talking about infrastructure projects. And when you say that even if the three factories work at full force, they are not enough to meet the entire demand. And on the other hand, you mentioned that we lack projects. We have funds, but we lack quality, well-structured projects with a proposal that can be evaluated by you, so you can grant the funds for that. So this is a concern. Our debate here aims to collaborate with the development of this project and help Brazil reach the potential we know the country has. So we can't help if there is no proactive activity or work that configures an arrangement that might result in a feasible project. Okay, for us to close this debate here, I want to talk to our audience here. We have some questions. I want to go through the third issue. I want to call back Alfredo and Flavio regarding implementation, but we have some questions for you in the end. And I want to remind you, our audience, that on the tab for questions in our platform, you can put all your questions there, and we'll bring them to our participants in the panel. Alfredo, bringing you back to the highlight. We talked about regionalization, we talked about credit for structuring, and to close the cycle, we want to talk about implementation. That would be the next step. And you as the MDR talking about financial resources that are managed under your sector. What can you tell our audience regarding this? After you have a project that is structured, validated, goes through public consultation, and is practically has granted the concession, we, on the other hand, need the action of the public sector to make sure they have the funds for the development, be it of new structures or the refurbishing of existing ones. What can you tell us about this? Rafael, in the Ministry of Regional Development, we work as manager of the application of the funds generated by the FGTS. This is the source of funds for the implementation of sanitation projects. that is more relevant or more significant we have in the sector. We have a process for analyzing proposals, and it's important to go back to what Manuel mentioned, the lack of funds for structuring projects, and also in terms of complementation, what we see here is the opposite. Historically, in FGTS, we have excess funds because of the lack of well-structured projects. So we can sponsor and implement these projects in a safe manner. But looking at an increased demand in the next few years, resulting of these new structures that are happening when they come out of auctions and when the contracts are signed, the next step would be the request for funds. FGTS continues to be a significant source of funds. We also have an instrument for tax benefits that has been gaining strength in the sanitation area. Up to 3 years ago, we had very few projects, like 13 ones that were approved for funds with tax incentives. But we had an increase of 300% in the last 3 years of a number of projects approved. We already have 42 projects, over 5.5 billion issued, and two potentially be issued only for the sanitation sector in the next year, probably. So we have this number of source of funds in addition to the private sector. Here we're talking specifically about very specific instruments such as the FGTS and applications that receive incentives. We now have for approval by the legislators another instrument that we hope will be approved soon, but we have a whole number of possibilities of finding results, funds, for example, in the capital market. These funds can bring these processes together. We've seen an increase, exponential increase of the issues in the sector, specifically for the solid residue sector. In the last few months, we had an approval of 2 projects in this area, and we see growth in the future. This year, we already is shaping to be the best year in terms of approval of projects of these instruments. With the FGTS, we work with the financial institutions and the operators, one part of Caixa, for example, that is focused on this area. And we also have the rest of the Caixa as a financial institution, where they also work to make this possible.
And now I'd like to talk about the resources for structuring all these projects. The funds, as Renato mentioned, were developed by the law 17. He mentioned it was a restructuring also of this fund to invest in infrastructure. And the quantity of resources available are evaluated around 700 million reais. And this specifically to talk about project structuring. So we'll have different resources. There is a work done jointly with BNDES. This is reflected in the process. And our National Sanitation Secretariat emphasizes a lot one of the works we have been trying to do in order to launch PNIs. This is an instrument which has some peculiarities, but in our opinion, if we have an action focused on improving the quality, they can also be considered a good complement, considering the lack of structuring. Thank you, Alfredo. It is really great to know that year after year, we have seen an increase in the number of projects that are apt to receiving resources for development and restructuring. As Manuel Renato mentioned, we need more projects. We have credit available. It's good to know what's going on. Flávio, can I bring you to take part in our discussion talking about the credit and the implementation after Alfredo's class? As Caixa, you can complement. We'd like to hear about your feelings related to some projects that have been already approved, that where the auction has already happened. What have you seen as Caixa? Okay, Rafael. First of all, complementing what Alfredo said related to PMIs, this is an alternative. It might be considered interesting if we can prepare complete bids, and we can also make an assessment of the results. We can make a careful and unbiased analysis, so you can in the end have a concession that will be sustainable. And when you count on the participation of the bank, of the BNDES and Caixa, or the PPIs take part in this process, you ensure the feasibility of this project somehow. Funding is important. You should also look at projects from these optics, and you will be able to have better credit conditions if all this is done carefully. And this will make things cheaper and more sustainable in the end. So the participation of public agents and public banks that have this exemption is very important to ensure that things are more sustainable in the end. And Caixa focuses on PPS and is one of the agents that can give credit for public and private initiatives. I believe Caixa is the major financial agent for PPS in retail. And we also try to give them support. As Alfredo mentioned and Manuel Renato mentioned, resources exist, but we have low quality projects. And many times we don't even have a project. We only have the intention of developing a project. So you have some time to present all the projects and to go through the approvals. So many times you have a contract, you sign it, but it is never implemented. So it is important to invest in projects. It's important to count on the support of PPI, of Caixa and BNDES. Otherwise, it is not enough to have only resources. If you have access to resources, you will have horrible deadlines and high rates. It will not make your project sustainable in the end. Perfect. Thank you, Flávio. Manuel, we have one question here from the audience. This question is for Manuel. I will give it to him later, but first of all, I would like to thank you for your time, for sharing your knowledge. I have two questions I would like to ask the table before we close. We received more than 10 questions from our audience. Unfortunately, we will be unable to answer all of them right now. However, there are two questions I would like to ask them here. One is from Dario Lamonelli. He asks about the scope of work of Caixa, up to which point Caixa takes over the technical responsibility. And he would also like to know if Caixa can take part in the technological development of the projects. Okay, Rafael. In reality, Caixa gives support to public agencies, and Caixa gives technical support and takes part in many technical initiatives. Usually, many projects are contracted by Caixa, and Caixa will help in the development of the projects, so that Caixa can make an analysis and can follow up in order to help with the effectiveness of the projects. Caixa has agreements that are signed to give support, so Caixa does have responsibilities in the processes. Caixa takes part in the project, in its structuring, and also in the bidding process with legal support if that is necessary. Caixa does not run from the responsibilities. But talking about specific issues related to the project, we have the technical responsible. Okay, thank you, Flavio. And I would like to share a challenge with you that came from Edson Carlos. He said that Manuel Renato talked about the concerns related to project structuring, and thinking about next year when we will have elections and tariffs charged to the population are constantly involved in that. Maybe it would be a good idea to have hybrid models, maybe a lower tariff and a different type of concession, just as happened in the state of Amapá now. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Manuel, can we start with you? Well, that's a great opportunity. Good question. I believe we always have to consider the interests of the society, and we have to find ways of holding a dialogue with the decision makers that are responsible for making effective decisions. Many times, the way these discussions happen are biased, and decision makers in the end do not really focus on the interests for the medium and long term. They only focus on the short term, and sometimes there is excessive freedom. The resources many times do not return to the sanitation sector. So this is a good question. This is a very important subject. I believe this will be broadly discussed next year because we will have elections, and we do hope we have the opportunity of spreading this way of thinking and sharing the concern with social sustainability. Because without social sustainability, once more, we can make the same mistake that was made in the past, and that made the development of this agenda so very difficult in Latin America. It's important that we pay attention to that. Many people are concerned with these services and how they will be provided, and in making things work, we have the law 1423 that has already been giving us good results. We should be concerned with social sustainability. We cannot leave that aside, otherwise our efforts will get lost. So we should be attentive to all of that, and this subject should be discussed with everyone. Decision makers, ABICOM, ABRAME, we all have this responsibility. The three institutions represented here, Caixa Econômica and BNDES, everyone who's a part of this agenda, have a very important role. And many times, curiously, we're not always talking about the immediate interest of these institutions. After all, this grant creates a demand for credit. So we should always pay attention to these elements. These are aspects we should take into account, and this is a part of all this mosaic of interests and all the elements we should consider in our daily work. This is the message I'd like to give you, and I thank you once again for the opportunity of having a dialogue with you. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Manuel, Renato, Alfredo. Talking from government to government, from the Ministry of Economy to NDR, of course, the Sanitation Secretariat has a very important role. How do you see this issue, this hybrid model of concession? How do you see the hybrid modeling of concessions for the future development of sanitation? I would just like to complement what Renato mentioned before. Actually, we have a great opportunity of testing new ways of doing things. This scenario we have today, with the new law and the new regionalization model, which was suggested, and the whole incentive, it's totally new. We are now trying something new in the Brazilian context. And we have many different situations in different regions of Brazil. It is certainly important that we are flexible and willing to assess hybrid models depending on the context and on the situation. We will have to face the tariff problem, which is not a small one, but we will always have to try to find a way of establishing a reasonable and fair tariff. So we should look for solutions to provide services for the population. The main deficit is within the poorest part of the population. So we should seek solutions and see how we can provide services to this population. At the same time, we should have reasonable ideas for the market, and we should provide the services to the broader population. So we are in a learning process right now. The first situation we mentioned, after the law 14026 was enacted, all that involved a huge learning process. It was not easy. And in the state of Amapá, a different solution was proposed with tariff reduction. So we are facing a learning process, and we should focus on tariff reduction, of course. But we do have many different options. I would like to thank you for the opportunity, for the capacity of sharing our experiences with you. If you have any more questions, we are available here. Thank you, Alfredo. Flávio, would you like to add anything after Manuel, Renato, and Alfredo spoke? Caixa, as a bank, is an essential part related to project structuring. I believe you can add something to our discussion related to the question of our friend Edson Carlos, related to the grant and tariff reduction. This involves also the modeling of the project, of course. Of course, this is an essential matter. Many people are involved, and there are many regions involved. So working with a partnership or with a grant focusing on tariffs is very important. It should be a fair and sustainable tariff, as Manuel, Renato mentioned. And we always work looking for alternative or hybrid models, different grants, other forms of structuring this concession. We should never leave that aside. Tariffs vary a lot with time. we look for different alternatives to make it feasible.
Just bringing a final highlight, Manuel talked about issues regarding governance and everything. This is a very critical issue, considering some structures we have, because this is not a quick process. It takes a while because of the stages you have to go through. And in this process, if you don't have a clear and well-defined governance, the project will not be launched. And in practice, it won't happen. So it is essential to think of the structure of this consortium so to make the thing feasible. Because then government changes, the process is not ready, and then everything goes to waste. Once again, I want to thank all of you and congratulations on holding this event. Flavio, thank you. I also want to thank all of you on behalf of Sanitation Brazil. Manuel, Flavio, Renato, thank you. I want to mention to our audience that we had over 10 questions. We have all of them, and the questions will be directed specifically to our participants so they can answer. So after the event, I will get back to you. Gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for your time. I hope we can continue with us and we can meet together soon in the future and continue this debate we started here. Thank you very much. Okay, I want to tell our audience that next we'll have a session with a presentation by Binder Group talking about technology for energy saving in the operation of water and sewage treatment plants. This presentation will be given in English by Engineer Manuela Charatian. She's a manager of process engineering, and we'll have the participation of Henrique Montes. He's the sales manager for Latin America for Binder. This presentation will be given in English, and I want to remind all of you that we have a simultaneous translation from English into Portuguese. So if you want to listen to the English in original with Manuela's voice, please keep the selector on the corner of your video in English. And to continue listening to Portuguese, keep the selection of the audio in Portuguese. Manuela? É um prazer ter você aqui esta manhã. Henrique, também é bom receber você aqui. Eu gostaria de passar a palavra a vocês dois para que vocês façam a apresentação da Binder. A palavra é sua. Muito obrigado por estar conosco essa manhã. Espero que vocês tenham uma excelente apresentação e um ótimo evento.
Bom dia a todos.
Obrigado.
Permitam-me me apresentar.
Good morning, everyone. I want to introduce myself. I'm sales manager for Latin America for Binder Engineering. I want to thank the organization for inviting us, and I want to thank the participants for dedicating your time to watch our presentation. Binder produces equipment for temperature, biogas, and for the biological purification of residual waters. Our team is better control, better environment. This is what we use for all our products when thinking of investment and increasing safety and security of the processes for people and the environment. And we consider all the values involved in the process. This presentation will be given by our manager of process engineering, Manuela Charatian. She's a specialist in Binder in the treatment of water and sewage, and she'll give you a very precise presentation regarding this innovative technology we have and all the benefits of using them in water and sewage treatment plants. If you have any questions at the end of our presentation, contact us and we'll be glad to answer. We're at your service. Muito obrigada, Henrique, pela apresentação. Infelizmente, meu português é muito fraco, então eu vou falar em inglês, como eu já fui apresentar. Eu vou tentar compartilhar minha tela com a apresentação. Só um minuto. Só um minuto, deixa eu achar a apresentação. Ok, muito obrigada. Vocês conseguem ver a apresentação? Eu quero falar dos componentes de alta qualidade e o controle avançado de aeração, que é a chave econômica de economia de energia na operação.
Let me give first some words about the Binder Group. So this is a map of Germany, you can see. And we are placed in the south, in the city where Albert Einstein was born. And this is a technology hub in Germany. You find many famous companies like Siemens, Bosch, Audi, and Mercedes close to our city. And so this means, of course, we have a special attitude and a special approach to high technical solutions, especially in the field of wastewater treatment plants. In some countries, we have our own subsidiaries, like we have Enrique for your country, Brazil. And as you could see already, he speaks already your language, also your language, Portuguese. And if we look to the Brazilian market, of course, there are already wastewater treatment plants, but actually they have following needs. There is a need to check the treatment capacity of the existing plants. And there is also a need to check the effluent quality, if the effluent quality meets the new regulations, the new governmental regulations. And of course, there is a big need to check if the existing plants can be refurbished, if they must be expanded. And of course, also all this work is related to investment costs. And a very important issue I want to focus today are the operational costs, because very often we see in the projects that there is 0.5% or 1% more of investment can give you 20 to 30% savings in operational costs later on. There are various technologies of wastewater treatment worldwide on the market, and also some further modifications. If we look to the main technologies, these are lagoons, non-aerated and aerated ones, activated sludge plants with surface aerators or submerged aerators, with common aeration system, with highly efficient aeration systems. And there are special technologies like biofilm technologies or combined technologies of activated sludge biofilm like MBBR, and sometimes there are also MBR plants or so-called filtration plants. We want to have a look today on in more detail into the activated sludge plants, because this is the most common technology you find worldwide in a huge number of plants. Typically aerated lagoon and non-aerated lagoon, for sure you know from your countryside, there is a high requirement on landscape, so expansion is not always possible. And if you look to the effluent quality, typically the quality is not very high. There can be a problem with odor, and the carbon footprint of these plants, this means the methane emission in general, is very high. If you put some aerators into these lagoons, there is no mechanical pretreatment. This means the whole capacity, the full load must be treated and aerated in, let's say, one big lake. And there are very often operational problems with mixing of the sludge and sludge sedimentations. So you need to think about how to get this sludge out of the aerated lagoon. There is a further problem related to the control of the dissolved oxygen concentration. Yeah, so you know the dissolved oxygen is necessary to feed the microorganisms who clean the water. And if there is not sufficient oxygen dissolved in the water, the aerated lagoon can have problems also with odor and effluent quality. So you see, aerated and non-aerated lagoons are related to operational problems as well as effluent quality problems. And odor, in many cases, is a further problem. If we look to common wastewater treatment plants with tanks in concrete and they use surface aerators or submerged aeration systems, the typical operational problems are noise, smell. So you see on the right-hand photo how the water drops are flowing through the air, and this can be very smelly. Surface aerators in general, they have a very small control range, and the load in the sewage treatment plant is changing permanently in a ratio of 1 to 10, 1 to 15 during day and night, week and weekend. And so surface aerator cannot meet these requirements on control range. If the tanks are slightly deeper, or if you control the speed of the surface aerators, very often there are problems with sedimentation of sludge. And if you look for the whole plant, the typical energy consumption of these plants are, for the aeration system only, are higher than 50 kilowatt hour per so-called people equivalent and year. So this figure is a value to compare the energy efficiency and so finally related the carbon footprint of all sewage treatment plants. And this means more than 50 kilowatt hour per people equivalent a year for the aeration system itself is a very poor carbon footprint. And therefore, in many applications worldwide, these surface aerators are used mainly in industrial wastewater treatment only, not in municipal. Because in industrial wastewater treatment plant, the load changes are not so high, and the problem of the small control range is not so high and not so affecting the wastewater treatment, but specific energy consumption still is very high. You see here some typical photos of different manufacturers of these surface aerators. But regarding energy efficiency, these systems shouldn't be used anymore in municipal wastewater treatment plants. The same with these submerged systems, typically used also in industrial applications only, but not for municipal wastewater. Let's have a look for the use of the activated sludge technology. There are different challenges. The first, maybe sometimes the biggest challenge is that if you build an activated sludge plant, or if you expand your plant with an activated sludge technology, you have comparable higher investment costs compared to lagoons or to systems with surface aerators. And there was a special challenge that the components must be designed proper. This means starting with the scrapers in the primary and secondary clarifier, especially the design of the aeration system finally defines the operational costs of the whole plant. You will see later on. And of course, if you have a sludge digestion, you can reduce the biological load of the aeration system for 1/3. And parallel, you can produce on your sewage treatment plant biogas, and so the whole carbon footprint of the plant and the energy efficiency increases and improves a lot. But these systems in the aeration system, the components in the system must be adjusted to each other. We call this system integration. This means proper design of number of blowers, number of diffuser, and also the control unit on top. And then by doing this, you get chances, of course, chances to get a high quality effluent you can reuse for agriculture, for irrigation. And the operation of your plant can be realized very energy efficient, and so the carbon footprint becomes very low. And so your investment becomes sustainable. This is maybe most important issue because we know a wastewater treatment plant to build is very expensive, but to operate is much more expensive. So the biggest chances are high quality effluent and reuse, energy efficiency, and a sustainable investment. Why do we speak about this? If you look for the whole operational costs of a wastewater treatment plant, 65%, so approximately 2/3 of all energy costs are related to the aeration system. And the wastewater treatment plant is typically the biggest municipal energy consumer. And so if you choose the right components in the aeration system, and if you do system integration well, and you can save 5, 10, 15, 20, or maybe more % of the energy consumption in the aeration system, the whole plant operation becomes much more efficient. Let's have a look for the single components of this aeration system. So you can see there are blowers, flow meter, air control valves, diffusers and mixers on one side, but also further sensors placed in the water for dissolved oxygen, ammonia, nitrate concentration. And on top, there must be a control system, like a brain or a control panel to calculate the actually required airflow rate and to adjust the control valves. And if you look to the literature in Germany, in Europe, in many countries, there is a target value for efficient system for the aeration system only, not for the whole plant. And this target value means 15 kilowatt hours per people equivalent a year for the aeration system, or 25 kilowatt hours per people equivalent and year for the whole plant. So you can easily calculate the average number of people equivalents of your plant by choosing 60 gram BOD per people equivalent and a day. And you can make a very easy, fast and simple check where is the specific power consumption of your plant. And by having a deeper look into the plant, you can find out very easily and fast what to do first. Of course, if the capacity of the plant is sufficient big and you don't need an expansion of the plant at all. Yeah, the products we can serve, we can supply, and where we can support you are the airflow meter, the control valves, and the local control panel, the control system. And how does this look like? So we have thermal mass flow meter of different types we can supply. We have different kinds of aeration control valves. For smaller sizes, the typical diaphragm control valves, and for bigger plants, the jet control valve. Typically, our solutions are patented. And the aeration controller on top, using the flex algorithm, this aeration controller contains some artificial intelligence. So this means this aeration controller is self-learning and self-adjusting. And this makes the operation of the system very easy because under and over aeration is recognized permanently and the parameter in the control loops are adjusted automatically. All our components are specially designed for the biological process and wastewater treatment industry. Yeah, sustainable solutions, of course, is one issue. And if you look to the plant needs first, if the plant is finished and built, highest process reliability and cleaning performance, of course, is typically the highest requirement on the system. But if you can save up to 50% energy and more compared to common systems, this will be also very nice for the operator. And if you have a user-friendly operation and the valve is preventive maintenance free, then you can save a lot of further money later on in the next 20, 30 years of operation. This technology is applicable to all activated sludge processes. So independent which system you use, which technology you use, if biofilter, if SBR, intermittent aeration, upstream denitrification, so all different processes can use our system. Our system is proven globally, so we have worldwide references starting in very small installations of 10,000 people equivalents and 2 tanks, up to big installations of 2.5 million, 3.5 million people equivalents, like the big plants in Munich, you can see on the right-hand side of the top photo, or in Shanghai by Longgang, or in Berlin, or in Singapore. We have many installations, also in the US, and these systems, they all run very well, and the operators, we can give you all these references, all the operator would choose our system second time again. Why? Because I told you already, our valves were developed and optimized, especially for the process of aeration air. And this means for the jet control valve, which is a very special control valve, that this valve can adjust and control the airflow rate very precisely, and it has a linear operational characteristic across the entire operation range. It is of rack design, fully stainless steel, and preventive service-free for 20 years. Worldwide unique and patented. So where is the potential saving? Conventional control valves typically run with 40 to 70 millibar pressure drop. The jet control valve can control the airflow rate much more precise and requires 2 to 5 millibars only. And this means this will lead to a decrease of the header pressure in the system and a direct saving of up to 15% of energy of the blowers. Let's have a look for the second component, the aeration controller. I told you already, this aeration controller contains some artificial intelligence. It permanently calculates the actually required airflow rates and adjusted the valve according to the actual demand to supply sufficient, but not too much oxygen to the bacteria, and so secure and improve the nitrogen removal from the process and get best cleaning performance with lowest possible energy consumption. So 20 to 40% reduction of energy consumption are possible, sometimes even more, only by this intelligent control on top, this control panel. I want to show you an example. You see on the left-hand side a plant with the blue lines. This is the typical DO concentration running around the set point. The set point was defined with 1.7 milligram per liter, and it was running before plus minus 0.3, plus minus 0.5 milligrams per liter. This was in January 2019. And then we installed our aeration controller with artificial intelligence, And you see 2 months later, the dissolved oxygen concentration much more smooth, much more stable. And so finally, the plant could reduce the DOZ for 0.2 milligrams per liter, which gave a further saving of roughly 4% of energy. I want to show you a second example and show you also the related savings. This is one plant in China, in Songchen. You see the DO concentration runs very stable around set point. The blue lines on top and down are plus minus 0.3 milligram per liter around the set point. And you see how the valve is opening, closing, opening and closing. Yeah? So you see the movement, the stroke of the valve. Sometimes the valve was operated fully open, and so in the back, the pressure of the system was adjusted on the minimum level. In this plant, before we installed the system, this was the typical average energy consumption. After startup and adjustment of the control parameter in the flex control cabinet, we immediately stabilized the DO concentration and could find out a saving of energy consumption of 28% after the fine-tuning. If you look to the effluent quality, the total nitrogen in the effluent, you could see the average total nitrogen concentration before was 10.6. And after the startup and fine-tuning, we got 8.8 milligram per liter total nitrogen concentration as an average value. So this means beside 28% energy savings, also the effluent quality became improved for 20%. And if we look for the peaks, the maximum before was roughly 40% higher at 14 milligram per liter. And after the fine-tuning, we had always concentrations below 11 milligram per liter. So the min-max deviations were also reduced. And because of the prevention of over-aeration, also the chemicals for dosing external carbon source to improve the denitrification could be reduced for more than 20%. The ammonia concentration in the effluent was improved for 30%, the nitrate concentration for 50%, and in a 5-month study comparison before and after, the average energy saving still was roughly 20%. Yeah, so what are the conclusions? You see, process safety first, equipment safety second, so we prevent blower tripping. There are different functions available in the system to maintain the diffuser elements, to reduce the pressure drop of the diffuser, to improve the bubble pattern and oxygen transfer efficiency. And this will lead to further energy savings and, of course, an improvement in control quality. So how do we get this? By using an advanced aeration controller. The parameters are adjusted fully automatic. This solves also a problem because sometimes you don't have good educated and trained people at the site. Yeah? So this system runs fully automatically after the startup. We eliminate disturbing factors due to load changes. We have different control functions and maintenance and monitoring functions, as I told you, related to the diffuser and the sensors. And so we achieve in all the applications we did worldwide, typically DVO deviations below 0.3 milligram per liter. And we have a proven data of improvement of total nitrogen by precise aeration control for 15 to 30%. We have proven energy savings by the precise aeration controller of 10 to 40%, by the precise control valve with the small pressure loss of 5 to 15%, The system of the sliding header pressure will lead to another decrease or power saving of 8 to 10%. And an additional ammonia-based aeration control will lead to a further 8 to 20%. And these measures all together will lead that the target value can be met. If we look to worldwide installations, the reality shows us that also in big plants worldwide, sometimes the specific power consumption is higher than 50 kilowatt hour per people equivalent a year. So you can imagine what is the potential saving of these plants, in these plants. Yeah, and if we look for the worldwide references, to show you only some pictures of the references, you see we are active in Europe, in Asia, in the US. So we have many, many installations. We do this business more than 20 years. We deliver sustainable solutions. I'm at the end. I hope that it was interesting. And if you have any questions, you can contact Enrique in Portuguese or me, please, in English. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuela. Thank you very much for presenting us some nice points of blender technology, as well the aeration technology, and we can add also the important energy saving technology, so important in these days. And when we talk about water and sewage treatment plants. Thank you very much. Henrique, muito obrigado pela sua presença, pela sua participação nessa manhã com a gente. Espero que esse evento possa gerar bons contatos para vocês aqui na América Latina, especialmente aqui no Brasil. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Muito bem. Dando sequência aqui à nossa agenda dessa manhã, eu quero, antes de iniciar o nosso painel para debater sobre os desafios da regulação,
panel, where we can discuss the challenges of regulation in the regionalization of the sanitation services. I would like to ask our production to go through our transition line quickly so we can move to the next panel. Production, please. Very well. Thank you, production. I would like to introduce you to our debaters. But first of all, I would like to remind our audience that every question can be sent through the platform. You have the question tab. You can send specific questions. Whenever you have a specific question to someone, please do not forget to mention the name of the speaker. When the question is open to any participant of the panel, feel free to insert an open question. Please do not forget you can select audio. Now we go back to the original audio in Portuguese, and you can use your headset and you can select the simultaneous interpretation feature. Very well. I am here with Percy Soares. He will be the moderator of this panel today for regulatory subjects. And I also count on the presence of Araújo, Adjunct Superintendent from ANA, who will be here on behalf of Victor Sabac. I also have Estela Testa, President of Sindesan, the National System Union for Manufacturers of Equipment for the Environment. And we also count on the participation of Marcos Cavacin, General Legal Manager of Sanepar. We are going to have a very important and challenging discussion now And I would like to leave the moderation to Percy. He's highly experienced. During the next hour, we will have discussions related to the challenges of regulation and regionalization of the new sanitation framework. I'd like to give you the floor, Percy, and you are in charge of this panel. Thank you very much, Rafael. Once again, I'd like to say it's a huge pleasure to be here, especially in this discussion table with Cynthia and Estela, partners of previous discussions on this subject. I'd like to congratulate you all. This is a very diversified panel. We have highly experienced people who talk to us, who are working in cogeneration of energy, and we have Estela, who understands a lot about technology and the supply of equipment and how to help operators to have the best performance. And Cynthia knows how to look at that from the viewpoint of regulations. This is not easy, right, Cynthia? It is not easy to regulate the generation of power. So I established my own logic in my mind, so I'd like to suggest you start telling us about the experience of Sanepar. I believe your experience is highly inspiring to the sanitation industry. So if you can please tell us about your experience, what you have been doing, the results you have achieved so far, and the challenges that are on the table now. I would later give the floor to Estela. She can tell us about how she sees the frontiers of technology and challenges and how they can help, and sanitation operators can incorporate that. And in the end, but not less complex, how we can look at this new activity within the scope of old contracts and new agreements and concessions in the sanitation sector. If you all agree, I can give you the floor so you can begin. I apologize. Sometimes I use words that are proper from the south of Brazil. I forget. Can you please tell us about Sanepar's experience? Good morning, Percy. It's a pleasure to see you here again. Good morning, Rafael, Manuela, Henrique, Cynthia, and Estela, who are here with us today. I am a lawyer, so I do not understand deeply technology, but we have been following the operations that have happened in the legal framework ever since we started discussing the provisional measures that came before the law 14026. We understand we have some very important cases here that have updated the legal framework from 2007, and we have some challenges. The national agency, which is represented here by Cynthia, they also faced major challenges from the viewpoint of regulation. And now we can talk about regionalization. We used to live with regional issues ever since things were implemented in other places. And we have always been searching for new technologies in how we can provide better services. The importance of the law 14026 from the viewpoint of regionalization specifically, in our opinion, is the possibility of having the state as a protagonist of this process. The state has always been present, but always through the state companies. This is a different reality. We used to focus on this reality for the northeastern states of Brazil, but we made divisions in micro regions in the case of the state of Paraná and São Paulo. And the possibility of having a regional planning focusing on the universalization of services, which is the main point of the law 14026. Another important point we need to mention is the economic financial capacity of service providers, which mandatorily will now deal with contract issues, focusing on the agreement and on the universalization methods, and providers should be able to do it. From the viewpoint of technology specifically, we should have an improvement in the efficiency of service providers, and we should have the capacity of investing in the best possible way, and we should arrive to universalization with the lesser possible impact on the tariffs of users. We should always remember the payment capacity of the users. So these are some of the very important axes of the new law. We should focus on the improvement of processes for energy generation and technological improvements also, the treatment and energy generation for our dams and also water supply. We have some important points in the new legislation here. This cooperation which will happen between the federated entities, we have the possibility of having shared decisions with all the municipalities that are involved in these interests, common interests like sanitation. They are declared issues of common interest. So we have a peculiar situation we are facing here, which has been also mentioned as an example for common interests, the involvement of federated entities in a cooperation, let's say, as we did before cooperativism. And some of these decisions can be made at a collegiated level. This is very important. From the regulation viewpoint, we can have national, federal rules for the services that we provide, contract modeling, and the capacity, economic, financial capacity, so we can attain targets and we can implement fiscalization and other things that are in our agenda. All this has been shared recently. This is for the next years, up from 21 to 23. We understand it's very important to have these federal rules. The industry was asking for that for a long time because the pulverization of all these rulings is a complicating factor and makes it difficult for the implementation of new technologies. So we should have a national understanding so that all the agencies can really become more professionalized and the sanitation sector was left behind. That's how we feel about providing services, and the electric sector and telephone sector have already done it. But our sector, we have a very strong discussion until the decision from ADIN was made in the state of Rio de Janeiro. Since we always had a municipal follow-up, we always faced some difficulties in convincing the government to implement frameworks and general rulings. I think that what Ana is doing from now on, after the new framework was enacted, of course, this process will have to mature. I cannot talk on behalf of the national agency, Ana, but I believe they are facing a huge challenge because they need to regulate the services. The deadlines are very tight. We are actually working with a very, very tight deadline. And we have an extensive agenda for the implementation of rules, which are extremely important to give us some legal safety, legal security, so we can improve the services that are provided, so that investors can feel more trust and make investments in the industry, so we can have public-private partnerships, and the private sector can really invest. We have some models implemented by the BNDES We already have a few success cases with the private participation in the sector. This is very important, and these guidelines will be essential for that, to improve the technologies we have been using up to now, and also to give some legal security from the viewpoint of agreements. And so we can make the possibilities of investments in the sector more flexible, so the investors will not be afraid of facing problems related to contracts halfway in the investment. Attracting resources is important. With the improvement of the legal security, I believe it will happen with time, improving more and more the implementation of rulings, professionalization of the state regulating agencies. That's very important. What happened? I think he stopped. Can you hear me? Cynthia, can you hear me? Yes, I hear you perfectly. So I think he froze. Let us see if he can return. Well, Cavacin gave us a global idea of regionalization, Stella, but I'd like to go back and talk to you about the generation of energy from sewage sludge. I believe this is a challenge in technological terms. It will have to be inserted into the services that are provided somehow. And I believe, Stella, I'd like to hear the following, because regionalization will give a scale in services that are provided. Is this scale important so we can make advancements in energy generation, beginning with sewage sludge? Are we prepared to develop a large-scale process? I'd like to hear about the companies that are represented by Sindesan. Can they somehow follow this quick pace? When we opened, I talked about the blocks in Rio de Janeiro. They could generate 25,000 tons of sewage sludge. Can we use that, Stella? Perfectly, Percy. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to take part in this event, focusing on this universalization. It's what we all want. I'd like to say hello to my colleagues, Cynthia Araújo, Percy, Marcos Cavazin, and everyone in the audience who's following us in our discussion. Many times, Brazilians went to IFAT, but now they will be here with us. I'd like to congratulate you on this initiative with Percy and Rafael. It is very good to count on the presence of everyone here. We will certainly hear news from Germany and from the first world. I can say that we have taken active part in the struggle to approve the legal framework. And our more than 100 associated companies are prepared to supply any and all energy requirements and technological requirements. We have worked in the part that has been already performed, 50%. We are ready for the other 50% of the energetic recovery of waste. We are fully aware of the challenges related to regionalization. However, we have been following the work from ANA, their victories, and the struggle. And we do believe that we will all move forward together. We will work aligned in order to improve all of those regulations through dialogue and transparency between ANA and the subnational agencies. And with all the experts and consultants involved, we will be able to achieve a victory. We'll do it slowly. It will not be quick, but it will happen. As to the quality and resistance of equipment, I do believe it's outside of the needs considered by the regulation. They are focused on allowing the profitable management of the providers. And when we talk about these solid residues, we have to think about the treatment of waste or only the treatment of sludge, because operators can consider sludge a product, so they will have more products to deal with, and this will really be helpful, I believe, because when we think about an ETE of 1 cubic meter per second, or if we have another of 5 cubic meters per second, the difference here is huge. So we have a very significant economy of scale for the operator, without thinking about landfills, because the ruling already eliminates that. The solution of a biodigestion of the use of a clean fuel, so you can dry and transform this into a fertilizer, well, that's a solution of the circular economy. I consider it a perfect solution for the operators. We already have some plants that are working like that, not as they should be working actually, but we should have all these wastewater treatment plants functioning perfectly. That will happen, and they will become a reference for the next ones that will be implemented. So complementing your answer, Percy, I do consider the economy of scale will be extremely important, because it will make the solution much cheaper, and the operator will receive the return it needs to continue with the investments. Thank you, Estela. Cavacin, I'd like to give the floor to Cynthia now. Actually, we tried to have a discussion on the generation of energy using waste sludge. I'd like you to tell us about your experience in generating energy. That's the question I wanted to ask you, and you froze. Cynthia, I have two questions for you. One is more generic in terms of the new regulatory agenda from ANA, and a more specific one about how you see this type of revenue, which might come from the use of the ETEs to use energy or to create other things. We have a product which can have a positive use not only for operators but for the whole society, and this will have to be embraced by regionalization. This is the second question. The first one is this following. Looking at the new regulatory agenda from ANA, we realize that the frameworks considered to balance the agreements are no longer in the regulatory agenda. What happened? What was the change that happened? We had two different guidelines. The operators considered both of them very important, and they are no longer on the agenda. I'd like to know what happened. Can you please tell us what happened? These two regulatory guidelines that were being expected for the second half have left the agenda. How can we incorporate that into our regulation? Have you been thinking about it? Is it an object of regulation? Is it considered an accessory revenue, or will it be considered in new contracts? How do you consider that part of using these byproducts? Thank you, Percy. Very easy, right? Only light questions, yes, because I'm a friend, of course. Yes, I know. Thank you so much for inviting me. As Rafael said, I'm here on behalf of our director, Victor Sabac, who had been invited initially for this panel. He was unable to come, unfortunately. So I'd like to thank you all And I would like to review a couple of subjects since we are talking about energetic recovery and regionalization. As Percy mentioned, these 2 points are extremely important and they do walk side by side. They are related to the need of gaining scale so we can add new activities to our sector. And we should mention the points of the law that mention regionalization. We should emphasize that the National Water and Basic Sanitation Agency, ENA, deals with this. We have several points, and we have a huge agenda and many issues. We do have until 2023, but many other subjects will remain. In the third paragraph, we talk about issues that should be approached in the update of these rulings, and regionalization is an extremely important point because of the importance related to the gain of scale and also because of the requirements related to the public resources. So this point should be really considered in our rulings and incentives. Now going into the things Percy mentioned, let us talk about the regulatory agenda first. I can really say that rebalancing was, well, it was not removed. Actually, it will be incorporated as a tariff review, because rebalancing, in our opinion, is no more than a review. So we will try to deal with in the best way we can, because we need to make an assessment of the regulatory model, first of all. This should happen in the beginning of 2022 with ANA's new agenda. We have a guideline to define all of that. And going into this point of the regulation model, I can say that we'll start taking into account the tariff models, and then in the second half we can divide it to talk about the standardization of future contracts. And Percy, I don't know where you said, I am looking at our website. We have the same level of contracts. We have a public consultation here, which will be closed on the 17th. But this has remained on our agenda for the second half of 2021. We have a public consultation going on now. We removed this rebalance because it should be dealt with at the proper moment. Well, that one that went into public consultation has a minimal content of contracts for the future. Well, the initial idea was this, answering what you said just now, and the standardization of the contracts will happen in the second half of 22, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check the guidelines here. Yes, risk matrix, we will deal with all these subjects. And then in 2022, we will deal with the broader contract standardization, because it's difficult to talk about specific issues without going through the proper path and doing things in the right way to incorporate that into an agreement that incorporates all these issues. So we will deal with the standardization later. I can say this is a necessary requirement. It should increase the legal security of the industry. And along the same line, going into these issues you have mentioned about how we see that inside ANA, we will discuss all these issues. All those subjects will be discussed in the future, and I believe if I can establish a differentiation for water, sewage, and waste, there are different things. We talk about sanitation in a broader way, but we have specificities in our sector. We have more logistical characteristics for waste, for water and sewage. We have a different model. We have every component of the chain. And sometimes we have different providers. Sometimes we have the same. And I believe that we can find a solution related to the energetic use of these waste. If we consider that in a regulatory viewpoint within the chain, I believe it is possible to think about a higher feasibility when you take into account all the externalities of this chain. If you need to consider regionalization and the transportation, less kilometers, if we take into account all those factors, we can add sustainability to the whole service. And we have the reference ruling from ANA. We already have these guidelines. We should implement that. I believe it's an essential point to ensure the sustainability and possibilities in this sector. And now talking about water and sewage, I believe that we have the contract standardization, because as you mentioned, we have future contracts and we have the current ones. When I talk about the future, everything seems easier because we can consider the best in the world. But when you talk about existing contracts, that's different. Of course, we value them, but we need to think about accessory revenues. We should focus on contracts with more accessory revenues. And for this sector of water and sewage, when we define what we should do more clearly and how to share this, maybe this would be better if we talk about accessory revenues for the energetic recovery for water and sewage. I don't know if I went through everything you wanted.
It's a pity Cavassini couldn't be with us. But Stella, when you're talking about energy, and that where is our technological barrier? For Pieralise, that might be a solution, but today we'll have, with the universal access, we'll have a huge amount of sludge generated in Brazil and generated in a very capillary manner, spread throughout the country. So where is our limits? Where do we have to move so we don't allow this sludge to take over spaces occupied by landfills? Where is the technology barrier? What are you looking at so you can bring to the operators in terms of technology so you can digest and reinsert this sludge back into the supply chain? So please talk about it. I don't agree that sludge is a problem. I think it's part of the solution. Okay, so explain to us why. The new framework and the universalization is opening possibilities, because today, along with urban waste, sludge occupies less space. Once you find a solution for solid residues for a region, you can find the same destination for both. Another one is using this sludge for cement, along with some products waste solid products that can be destined to that. So these are other possibilities. Also, within the treatment plant, with the digestion of this biological sludge, you can get the power to dewater this sludge, and then you have the possibility in this cycle to generate power from this dewatered sludge. Okay, now you are going to have larger plants because you have more material to be treated, but you have more solutions. In the past, we had nowhere to go, but now having scale, even the investments become feasible, because when you talk about equipment for 1 or for 5, you're talking about equipment that talks 1 or 2.5 and not 5 times more. So we'll have a whole chain that can use this sludge. So I do think sludge can bring revenues to the operator. No doubt, Stella, but where is the challenge? Technology is ready. What are you looking at as a challenge? Maybe improving the dewatering system, the burning system. Where is the opportunity in terms of technology barriers so we can use it? Or no, technology is not a problem. The problem today is just bringing the costs, process costs down. I'd say technology is not a problem. We have this technology implemented even. I think the problem is scale. That's why regionalization comes really to meet these needs. Because when you bring all this sludge together, you have a more economical solution. These I do consider hard to do, but when you have different regions. But when you have one large region and you have all that brought together into a single treatment, it is feasible and it can be profitable for the operator. Thank you, Stella. So Cynthia, this information Stella as a specialist is bringing, it's very useful for the regulator. I imagine that once those who are creating the regulations understand that the use of these residues are an opportunity once you gain scale, how do you incorporate that into a contract? I imagine you have several possibilities, you have several possible solutions that might be specific for specific regions. So as a regulator, Cynthia, how do you see that? How do I bring all that with the flexibility of letting each region find its own solution? For example, if I have a single solution, that's easy. I put it there in the norms and you have a single one, but I have a single guideline that is reuse, but the norms will be adapted to each case, and that's a challenge for a regulator. And opening that for a broader discussion, I imagine that if you take specific cases of the use of sludge in general, you have challenges in other issues for Ana. Brazil is a country of continental dimensions. How do you work that? So I think it's interesting to see how you're thinking about this so we can understand and even help Ana in the process. Perfect, Bessie. This is a huge challenge. And for us to create the reference rules, you have to consider specificities of each region. And what would be those? Not only specificities of the regions, but differences regarding contracts, difference in operation. We have a huge number of differences. In the indemnity norm, you were able to create a profile that is not completely defined, but we realized that we had to consider existing contracts, contracts subject to rules, some that are not, and we have to evaluate the situation and see what differentiation we have to bring. If you think about what you can help, is showing us what are the business opportunities we can have. We'll always work on the norms considering service sustainability and considering universalization, which is the main thing. So additional possibilities, revenues that might be incorporated to increase feasibility, a part of residues, for example, incorporation into some regulations. All this has to be verified, and I doubt we'll have a single better solution for the entire country, because the limit is the power who is granting the concession. We'll have to guide towards a decision. For some decisions, we will have an optimum point they might chase. It's not talking specifically, but if you say that they have to grant the entire chain, that's not possible. We cannot impose that and saying that you have to grant to a single provider all the stages of the chain. I have to allow for better alternatives so the decision makers can find the best solution. We need to evaluate all possibilities so we can incorporate all that. And when I'm talking about reference norms, I'm thinking about the best possible regulation solution for each situation. Thank you, Cynthia. Stella, Cynthia just gave us homework saying bringing her the specificities. So let's start talking next week so we can bring her that. I have a question here raised by the audience. Would it be possible to stimulate revenues, dividing gains between concessionaires and clients, talking about reuse of sludge? This came from the audience. And I want to add another one. The business of reusing sludge, is this a business for the operator, or could it would be a business developed by a new company? Who wants to start? Stella? Well, Cynthia, I can say, okay, I'll start. Cynthia, when she says you cannot make the same operator meet all the needs, I think among them, they will be able to have business. One is generating energy, the other one needs the energy, and this will depend on the region. You have one reality in Paraná, another one in Rio de Janeiro, another one in São Paulo. So, of course, all stakeholders need to work together to bring solutions that will certainly be profitable. Because if you have a place that is generating power, another one is generating fertilizers, and they are all working together, it won't be hard to find the best solution for all. Cynthia? That's it. Exactly. As I said, trying to answer the issue raised by the audience, we always need to think on how to share, and how much do we share with the consumer, so we don't reduce the incentives given to the operator for doing business. If you share everything, the operator will not have any incentive to work. So we have to work on new technologies and work on some way that you have to give some a situation where you have a win-win between consumers and operators. Thank you, Cynthia. I want to ask a question from my friend André to both of you. sludge alone is not a challenge. How do you see the laws and norms regarding the reuse of effluent considering climate change? Stella? Feel free. I'm glad André Limotov doesn't think sludge is a problem. But I think reuse is a one-way street. There's no coming back. Since regulation is bringing room for so many topics, reuse is an important one because it's a solution for operators, for local industries. It brings a feasible solution that I think Anna will have to participate in it. We'll need to get involved. Cynthia? We do have this issue of reuse to be included in the reference norms. We're working with the Ministry of Regional Development on related issues, but I think all these issues are very important and need to be considered when we have an adequate regulation environment and the development of new technologies. The operator will seek solutions. I think it's sensible not to mandate specific solutions. I think the operators will seek new technologies, new developments, and we need to promote this and give incentives for these developments. And I think this is very important because we're going through a moment of very serious water constraints, a serious crisis. I'm talking about resources not only for supply but for other uses. We're reducing the use of drinking water, but I think reuse gets into a bottleneck of environmental issues that needs to be taken into account to allow more proactivity. So we have to monitor this and promote environmental regulations and environmental rules to promote this use. This is a topic I really like. I think we have a challenge regarding environmental rules regarding reuse, but we have a challenge to adopt a business model. I have been following, I don't know if you have, but I recommend you do. I'm following the experience conducted in the state of Espírito Santo. I think it's an experience on reuse that is very important for the sector to look at, something that has been negotiated for a long time. And I think what they have been doing and doing very in a very competent manner needs to be observed by the regulators, by the sectors, because that experience can bring us great insights and guidelines to follow.
Now, Rafael, if you allow me, I would like to give the floor to Cynthia, and we could not have Sinepar until the end. This is a concrete experience which we could have explored, and also the many contracts they are closing. When it's time to generate energy, they can use sludge. But if you wish to leave a final message, I will challenge you, something connected to what we are talking about here, to how to use energy from sludge. How can we mobilize the sanitation sector so this issue will gain strength inside the sector and we can make a reality out of it? I'd like to begin with Estela and then I'll move to Cynthia. Estela, you have the floor. Well, I believe Cynthia already told us how we should do. As Anna, she is open to receiving our ideas for each region. And as Sindezan, we can talk to ANA about it because we have the technology and we will be with the operators. We have 30-year contracts. So we need something that will be good for now, for 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30. So maybe we can discuss with Anna how to bring this idea. It will make a whole difference related to what you want per se. We can talk about the best solutions for each region. It is not what I want, Estela, it's what the sector needs. Cynthia. Besides giving good ideas, how can we help? I believe that good ideas are already essential for that. Showing the challenges. Here at ANA, we are trying to design the best model so we can always add regulatory and legal security so we can increase investments and universalize the services we provide. So, taking into account regionalization, which is a very important subject, it should give more feasibility to everything we need. I believe that we should have business focusing on sustainability. We will give a solution so we can structure the best regulatory rule. Rafael? Well, I was put here as a moderator because I cannot speak too much. I cannot resist, however. I believe we have done extensive work, especially the agencies that are here, so we can really put sanitation into the agenda. We are trying to establish a new story for sanitation in Brazil. It is now in the political agenda, and when I saw the new sanitation as a cover story at Valor Econômico newspaper, I said, well, that's it, sanitation is now in the agenda. Maybe we have a crusade ahead, and we should look at a sewage treatment plant as a raw material station. And I believe, Estela, that equipment suppliers can really help us a lot here. There is wealth in sewage and waste. We have water, nutrients, energy. So I believe we should transform those wastewater treatment plants. So we should not look at that as the end of a process. I believe the regulators should help us. I believe we were happy when we said, yes, sharing revenues is good, but we cannot lose incentives, otherwise we are going to die. We'll get nowhere. We should think about new business models and how to make the best of it. So now answering the very question I asked you both, I would say that maybe we have a good idea here, and Rafael and maybe Yuri, who's there, and our partners in this initiative. Maybe we can have an idea, which is, let us start thinking about wastewater treatment plants as raw material plants. There is a lot of wealth in waste, in sewage. We cannot think about it like the end of a process. Let us do a rebranding. Let us look at waste as an input for several industries. I believe we can focus on that. We can go into ESG and many modern ideas. We talk a lot, however, that's the daily life of Estela, who's working with us, my associates who work with waste every day. It is nothing new to us. It's our daily work. But we should take that and we should dress it with new ideas, ESG, sustainability. The next step, however, is transforming the idea of a wastewater treatment plant into a raw material station. Thank you very much. I am really happy for sharing this discussion with Estela, Cynthia. It's a pity we cannot count on the presence of Sanepar until the end. I give you back the floor. Percy, thank you so much. I'd like to thank you all for your presence here. I was talking to Canassim. Sanepar is facing some technical problems, connection problems. It's a complex week. I'd like to apologize to the audience. I am unable to continue. His connection is very unstable. He kept frozen and his connection fell repeatedly. I am happy with what I'm hearing. This all shows how aligned we are. When we started talking to you and looking at the sanitation market, we intended to evaluate the wealth of opportunities we have in our country. We are not using that. It's good to treat water. Yes, it's wonderful. But our main deficit is the collection and treatment of waste and sewage. This will create huge energetic opportunities, especially for our operations. I'll call it a retrofeed of what is generated. All that exceeds can be made available to the population once again. The distribution network, and whatever is left after treatment can be diversified. It can be used by other industries. This afternoon, we'll talk about energetic recovery. We talked to Abraham about it. And talking about sewage and about residues, this can create new opportunities for Brazil in terms of energy. I am really pleased because we know we are fully aligned, not only in our purposes, but in how we see Brazil and we see the opportunities. And once again, I'd like to repeat what I said this morning. We know that Brazil offers a river of opportunities. We have many opportunities we can explore. Percy, Estela, Cynthia, thank you so much for the time you have given us this morning. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge and technical information. There are important issues you left. We should think about them. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rafael. Very well. So, before we close our sanitation block, I would like to invite Diego Jivelli, who's the commercial manager of Pieralisi. Diego, since we talked about sludge in the previous panel, Diego will talk to us about technologies for sludge treatment using the energy cogeneration. Diego, I'd like to welcome you. Good morning / good afternoon. You have the floor. Thank you, Rafael. It's a pleasure. My name is Diego Jivelli. I'm the commercial manager at Pieralisi. I have been working in this market for 10 years now. I can say I feel very proud for being able to talk about this subject. We can see how much sanitation has advanced, and we are talking about universalization, not only of sanitation. We are also talking about quality of life, health. We are talking about sustainability, and it's becoming more and more relevant, especially to us. I can say we feel proud for being a part of this scenario. I believe the universalization will go through the union of our groups and associations, and this subject should be shared with the population so they become aware, and so we can really attain the results we expect to. I'd like to share my presentation with you now, since Percy talked about sludge. He already prepared the scenario, so I can talk about this. Can you see my screen? I will share that with you. So talking about Pieralisi, Pieralisi has existed for more than 20 years in the national market. We have been for 5 years. We are global and national leaders in sludge solution. I always talk about it because we are more than equipment supplier. We provide solutions, and we like to be an integrating part of this process. We like to bring innovative solutions, think with the client in order to solve the problems, and focusing on the goals and needs of our end clients. So we'll talk about compact solutions for the treatment and drying of sludge using energy generation. To leave everyone on the same page, I'd like to explain to you what is this sludge we have been treating and which solutions we can bring to the panel, some innovative solutions. We have a basic treatment system. I will not go into many details here, but sludge is the organic matter which is removed. The nature depends on the characteristics and the treatment which was chosen. We do not have specific rules or a formula for what will enter and what will go out. We know about the specificities of treatments, whether we are talking about sewage or effluents or industrial waste. It is important to understand the type of sludge you have to see where we can get to with regard to efficiency and performance. Now that we know that sludge is the final residue of the waste treatment, it has a lot of added value during the whole process. We will begin with the flow chart of sludge dehydration. So we have sludge here in this stage from 1 to 10%. We always like to consider the weight. That's the dry part of the sludge which is going into processing. The system is then pumped and measured through a flow rate meter, and it will go to the centrifuge decanter. Of course, for a perfect conditioning, the sludge requires a conditioning with a polymer, which might be powder or an emulsion polymer. We use it in this system. We also measure the flow rate, so it can go to the centrifuge decanter where the phases will be separated. The main objective is dehydration, removing as much water as possible so you can have dry matter. Normally this goes to a landfill, okay? And here we have chlorinated water, which usually goes back to the beginning of the process. Here we have the solid, which will be transported, and we have from 25 to 30% of dry matter. It is important to emphasize here that the treatment of sludge, as I mentioned before, has specificities related to each process and efficiencies that are determined with each study and the organic part, the organic matter. I'll talk about the principle and how the decanter works so you can get to know it.
I'll stop the video here. So I'll explain to you how this equipment works. We have this sludge already with the polymer that comes into the feeding tube. It's composed of a tube and a spiral, and you have centrifuge force throwing the solids against the walls and then compacting it. And then here you have the end where the sludge is taking. The clarified won't have a space to go through, and it will come out through the liquid output. You can regulate the speed of rotation, the polymer you can use, and all other components. I'll show you a very quick video of 45 seconds. So you can see some application. thinking of this compact solution in the flow chart you saw, for those of you who have experience with sludge, the conventional idea is for you to create a huge building for the dewatering, put the equipment on the top, and have the entire infrastructure. And then we have some questions regarding that. Who would be, you have to hire a contractor to build it. You need technicians to set everything up and hire someone to operate the system for you, in addition to overseeing the entire process. And also the issue of efficiency. So where's the problem? Pieralisi thought of a compact solution for all that, where you have a turnkey system for dewatering and drying, where you have efficiency in the entire process. It's a compact system. We eliminate civil works, and it comes with hydraulic and electric equipment. So you have the entire responsibility for the system, and we created this compact systems. Here we have the entire flow chart I showed you before, everything compacted into the structure. All this is controlled through this electrical panel. In this case, we also have sludge thickening, so you can have more concentrated sludge in the entry of the system, an integrated polymer system. This orange part is where you have the feeding, and everything prepared for the return. So what do we need for operation in this system? You need a small structure of concrete. You have electrical feed in the main system, the sludge itself in the beginning of the system, and thinking of making it very practical and catering to these needs, we created this compact system. Here we have another picture that shows the knowledge, our knowledge of engineering, so we can have, I can show you that we don't need civil works. You only need the concrete base. Here you can only insert sludge in the way the client desires, and no problem. On the other photo, I place the system and on the truck, so you can see that we think of a mobile system. This structure can also be taken to other stations. We have clients that, for example, dewater once a week in smaller regions, puts the system on the top of a truck, and with a single system they can cater to the treatment of all the stations. So we always think of a system like this with that is 2.5 meters wide, so we can be transported without any special requirements. What are advantages of this system? Talking about the fact that it's a customized system, this is an issue. It has a reduced implementation area, low cost or almost inexistent cost with civil works, lower operational cost, shorter implementation time. We can put it all together in the factory. So when it is implemented, what the technician is going to do is regularly adjust it to the conditions of your sludge with no big issues. It has operational mobility because you can take it around, and a reduced time for implementation. Talking a little bit about data, it's interesting to bring you this too. We always measured on Sabesp's rulings, and I believe other agencies will choose the same technical norms. Let's regard the amount of solids in the sludge that is received depends on the number of organic matter you have in this effluent. This make difficult for the polymer to work. So if you have sludge with more volatile solids, you have a higher percentage. If you have more organic matter, you have a higher degree of dewatering. So you have 50 to 55% of volatile matter, and if you have a level of solids of about 27%. Same thing happens with the consumption of polymers. Going from 60 to 70%, you have a consumption of 10 kilos per ton of dry matter of polymer. And another important issue is the capture of solids that goes up to 98%, and what does that mean? It's how much solid matter I can remove from sludge, because you have the highest level, and this is the differential of our company. I'll show you quickly another video. Can you see the compact? You can see the compact system in the back. The solid waste being thrown in the container where it's going to be taken to the dry fill. We still have 75% water in this sludge, though it seems to be very dry. We still have a lot of water. And here you have the clarified water that goes back to the beginning of the system. It's important that this amount of water is small compared to the flow of the entry, and it can go back and no problem. And thinking about all that, in considering we still have 75% water, the cost of this, when you bring it to the landfill, it reduces the service life because of the water that is aggregated to the system. And more we have difficulties in disposing of this. So thinking about that, Pieralisi brought a complete solution using the gas generated by the station. Since you have sludge coming from a sewer, it goes through a reactor, anaerobic digestion. This generates biogas, and what happens, as Percy also mentioned, we have a wealth of value in the sludge. So we use this biogas, use it in a process of power generation. We can't specify because it depends on each process. We can use different process, and that depends on the demands of the client and how you want to generate this power. Thinking about that, the exhaustion gases of this process can be used for the dewatering of the sludge. Here you have a system by Pieralisi with a dryer that you can dry the solid residues, and depending, we can generate a class A sludge that can be used in agriculture depending on the norm involved in the entire process. And talking about the thermal dryer, we have a system with all the parts that get in touch with the process, and still it's the most compact solution of the market. For that, doesn't require chemical products for operation. You have hot water coming in and getting in contact with the product. We have negative pressure throughout the system, and later these hot gases are sent through a cleaning where they can be treated within the norms for the state. So this is an automatic cleaning system, and then you will have pellets of sludge coming out of the dryer, of this dryer. So here I'm showing you the burner that generates a flame in a combustion chamber, and then you have a chamber that through which the sludge comes into the system, and then you have the thermal drying of this sludge. Here I put a version with a burner because this biogas can be used for this flame and for this drying. So if you want to save energy, you can still dry your sludge. So it's a complete solution, thinking about all the problems found in the system. Sizing is also another great job done by our engineering. We calculate the amount of sludge you're going to process, how much it's coming in, how much you want coming out, and the amount of fuel you have, and considering all the characteristics of the fuel you're going to be using. Here you have a picture, very interesting one, of a system we provided for a plant in Bauru, and it shows the size of the drying chamber. It's entirely made of steel, extremely durable. It will last for 40 or 50 years easily. And most importantly, I'd like to highlight the treatment of gases after the drying. It's part of Piralis's entire system. We don't look only at the drying and dewatering system. We think of the solution as a whole. Thinking of that, we will perform the cleaning of these gases. Here we have the guidelines. We have the Frodenberg guidelines that go up to 50 for of material, and then we can get 10 from our dryer. Then we have NOx and 4 gases that can be thrown in environment, and then you have the results of our system. Bringing as a conclusion for the entire process, I wanted to make a very brief presentation so you can all stretch your legs and get something to eat. I wanted to make it interesting and short, full of information. So we have a conclusion that we have possibility of Class A sludge, generation of power for the ETA. We can have a reduction of up to 80% in the volume of sludge, efficiency of 50 to 55%, easy transportation, low odor. We have compact and efficient systems according to ESG practices. We're looking at that and bringing that into our company so we can bring this ease and comfort and ease for our clients, adding value to sludge. This is what we know how to do, what we do best, and we can bring to the market. And just to close, we have a video of dryer working when you have the dewatered sludge coming out. You have the combustion chamber, and finally the pellets of sludge. In this specific case, it has 98% of solids with pellets of 3 to 4 millimeters of size, with the possibilities of reuse as in agriculture, and also talking about economy in terms of transportation to landfills. I'd like to mention that why not using a solution like that in a landfill? You have biogas generated in the entire process. You have an increase of the service life of this landfill. So you can think of solutions not only for those who are generating the sludge, but those who are receiving it. So we can think out of the box and bring a solution for the entire process. Thank you very much. This is what I wanted to bring you. You have all my contacts, so follow us on. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I always post things about our equipment. You also have my cell number, and I'm at your service to answer any questions you may have. Rafael, I'll give you back the floor, and thank you once again for the opportunity of talking in an event with so many important people. Thank you, Diego, on behalf of all the organizations involved. Thank you for your presentation and for presenting the technology by Piralis. After such a rich debate, and where we brought the theme of the sludge into the debate. It's very interesting to bring this technology created by Pieralisi, which is a reference not only in Brazil, but all around the world. Thank you very much for your participation. And I want to thank our audience. As you said, we are at lunchtime. So after Diego's presentation, we'll be closing this morning in the our Sanitation and Energy Recovery Forum. We're closing the sanitation part. We want to thank Bidder Engineering and Pieralisi, our gold sponsors, Komatsu, our silver sponsor, and tell you that we'll be back at 2 p.m. with the second part, focusing on energy recovery with 2 debate panels with topics that are very important and aligned with what we discussed in the morning. So we have an event with a beginning, middle, and end. So take this 1.5 hour, 1 hour and 20 minutes interval to eat something, answer your emails, walk, stretch your legs, and we'll be back at 2 p.m. Thank you very much for all of you who are with us, and see you soon.
Qual é a base de uma grande parceria? Maneiras de fazer sua empresa avançar. E acordar sabendo que, independentemente dos desafios que o mundo trouxer para você hoje, sua parceira estará ao seu lado com as percepções e o suporte de que você precisa. Por um século, a Komatsu foi essa parceira. Nossas raízes remontam a uma floresta exuberante no Japão que já abrigou uma mina de cobre vital à comunidade vizinha. Dessa floresta e da imaginação de nosso fundador, emergiu uma empresa global com um compromisso intransigente com qualidade, confiabilidade, inovação e a parceria que você precisa para capacitar você a impulsionar nossa sociedade. Hoje, sabemos que resolver seus desafios comerciais também devem resolver os sociais. A capacidade deve ser combinada com dados inteligentes, criatividade com resultados comprovados e sucesso financeiro com o bem social. Por meio da colaboração, podemos criar o mundo de que precisamos para as gerações que virão. É por isso que você confia na Komatsu, a sua parceira para criar um futuro sustentável onde negócios, pessoas e o nosso planeta prosperem.
Esse vídeo é sobre algo que fazemos todos os dias, gerar lixo. O Brasil gera em torno de 80 milhões de toneladas de resíduos sólidos urbanos por ano, o equivalente a 30 estádios do tamanho do Maracanã. E quase nada disso é reciclado, pois 96% de tudo isso vai para aterros sanitários ou lixões a céu aberto. Apesar dos significativos esforços através da reciclagem de catadores, compostagem e aproveitamento de gás de aterro, a valorização energética vem para complementar essas tecnologias, visando a quase total mitigação dos gases do efeito estufa, como é feito em países desenvolvidos. O conhecimento e educação sobre o processo do seu lixo podem trazer benefícios ambientais, sociais e até mesmo econômicos. Usinas Waste to Energy são baseadas na recuperação energética, através do tratamento térmico do lixo. A ABREM, a Associação Brasileira de Recuperação Energética de Resíduos, busca resolver dois grandes problemas atuais: a destinação dos resíduos sólidos e a geração de energia limpa. Seu lixo pode virar eletricidade, energia para a produção de cimento, combustíveis, empregos, evitar a contaminação da água potável, reduzir as emissões de gás de efeito estufa até 8 vezes, além do aumento dos níveis de reciclagem, já que os países que mais tratam termicamente seus resíduos são os que detêm os melhores índices de reciclagem e compostagem. A ABREM quer revolucionar o setor de resíduos no Brasil, e você está convidado a fazer parte dessa história conosco.